A millionaire stood alone at his son's grave when a soft broken cry drifted through the cold air behind him. At first, he thought it was the wind whispering through the headstones, but then came the quiet sound of breathing, the kind that trembles between fear and exhaustion. When he turned, he saw her, a barefoot girl, no older than 9, shivering in the snow, clutching the corner of his son's headstone as if it were the last safe place on earth. What she said next shattered everything he thought he knew about his son. "I knew Noah," she whispered. "He was my only friend. He told me if anything ever happened to him, I should find you." Before we go any further, ask yourself, what would you do if a stranger appeared at your child's grave with a message they left behind? Because what happens next will shake every belief this man ever held about love, loss, and redemption. The morning had started like so many others for Ethan Caldwell, silent, gray, and heavy. Snow covered the paths of Greenwood Cemetery in a perfect, untouched sheet, except for the footprints that led straight to the marble headstone etched with the name Noah Caldwell, beloved son. For 5 years, Ethan had returned on this same day at this same hour carrying the same bouquet of white lilies. Each visit felt colder than the last. He had built companies, led empires, and collected fortunes most could only dream of, but none of it could buy back time or silence the guilt that never stopped whispering, "You weren't there when he needed you most." He knelt beside the grave, brushing snow from the name with his gloved hand. "Happy birthday, kid," he murmured. His voice cracked, swallowed by the wind. For a long moment he just stared at the ground, the silence between them filled with everything left unsaid. Then sniffle. Barely a sound, but enough to make him turn sharply. Behind the neighboring stone, a pair of wide, frightened eyes stared back at him. The girl looked fragile, like something the world had forgotten. Her coat was too thin, her cheeks raw from the cold, and her hair tangled in messy curls. She froze, ready to run. Ethan softened his voice. "Hey, it's okay. I won't hurt you." She didn't move. "Please," she said, her voice shaking, "don't make me leave." He took a cautious step closer. "You shouldn't be out here, sweetheart. It's below freezing." "I'm fine," she said quickly, hugging herself tighter. "I just come here sometimes." "To the cemetery." She nodded. "It's quiet. He used to meet me here." Her gaze shifted toward the grave beside them. "Noah." Ethan's breath caught. "You knew my son." She nodded again, eyes glistening. "He brought me sandwiches, sometimes a blanket. He said I mattered." For a man who had forgotten how to feel, her words pierced like glass. He tried to steady his breathing. "What's your name, Lily?" "Lily," he repeated softly, as if tasting the word. "Where are your parents?" Her face fell. "My mom got sick last year. She didn't wake up. My dad left after that. I lived near the old subway by Central Park." Ethan felt something twist inside him. Anger, sorrow, guilt, all tangled into one unbearable ache. His son, the boy he'd barely had time for, had seen this girl, cared for her, helped her. When had he become so blind? She looked up at him again, her lips trembling. "Before Noah, before he was gone, he told me if anything ever happened to him, I should find you. He said you'd help me." Ethan could barely speak. He said that Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled note, folded a dozen times. He took it carefully. The handwriting was Noah's unmistakable. The ink was faded, but the words were clear. "If something happens to me, promise me you'll look after Lily. She's been through more than anyone knows." His knees nearly buckled. 5 years he'd mourned, believing his son's life ended with tragedy. But here in this fragile child's trembling hands was proof that Noah's heart had lived on, still trying to help even after death. Without thinking, Ethan shrugged off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. She sank into its warmth, whispering, "It smells like him." He swallowed hard. "Come with me, Lily. You can't stay out here." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "You mean, with you?" He nodded. "You mattered to Noah. That means you matter to me." She hesitated, then stepped forward, small and trembling. And for a brief, impossible second, Ethan saw his son's smile flicker across her face. It felt like the first sunlight after endless winter. As they walked toward the car, the cemetery around them fell into silence. Snow drifted softly from the gray sky, covering the path they left behind. Neither of them noticed the figure standing at a distance, half hidden among the trees, a man watching them leave. Inside the car, Lily turned to Ethan. "Do you think he'd be proud of you?" Ethan looked out at the falling snow. "I hope so," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "He said you'd understand one day." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. But Lily only stared out the window, her voice quiet and steady. "He told me he had a secret, one that could change everything." Ethan's hand froze on the steering wheel, the engine hummed softly, the world outside blurring into white. "What secret?" "Lily." She looked down at the note again, her fingers trembling. "He said he was scared, but he was doing the right thing." Ethan's heart began to pound. There was more, something his son had hidden, something this little girl knew. And for the first time in years he felt something stronger than grief. He felt purpose. What was Noah hiding? What truth had cost him his life? Keep watching, because this story is just beginning, and what Lily reveals next will break your heart wide open. The drive back to Manhattan was quiet, except for the hum of tires against wet asphalt. Lily sat in the passenger seat wrapped in Ethan's oversized coat, her small face barely visible above the collar. Every few seconds she'd glance out the window, watching the city lights slide past like falling stars. Ethan tried not to stare, but there was something haunting about her stillness, a kind of calm that didn't belong to a child. When they pulled up in front of his building on Fifth Avenue, she froze. The glass tower stretched into the clouds, a reflection of everything Ethan used to believe mattered. To him, it had always felt like a fortress. To Lily, it looked like another world. "Is this where you live?" she asked quietly. "It is," he said. "Don't worry, you'll be safe here." The doorman straightened at the sight of his employer arriving with a barefoot child, but Ethan's sharp glance ended any questions. He led her through the lobby and into a private elevator. As the doors closed, Lily's reflection shimmered beside his. In the mirrored walls, his crisp suit, her torn dress. Two people from opposite worlds sharing one small silent box. When they stepped into the penthouse, Lily stopped in the doorway, her breath catching. The space stretched endlessly, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the New York skyline. White marble floors gleaming under soft light, a grand piano resting in the corner beside a stack of untouched mail. "It's so quiet," she whispered. "It usually is," Ethan said. "Do you live here alone?" He hesitated. "Yes." Her eyes moved from the windows to the photos on the mantel, one of Noah smiling beside a sailboat, another of Ethan shaking hand with some nameless executive. She lingered on the picture of the boy. "That's him," she said softly. "Noah." Ethan's throat tightened. "Yeah, he managed." "That's him." He motioned toward the kitchen. "You must be starving." She nodded shyly. Within minutes, he was rummaging through cabinets, discovering how little he actually cooked. He settled on soup and bread awkwardly, setting the bowl in front of her. She ate slowly, each bite cautious, like she wasn't sure it would last. "Thank you," she murmured. He sat across from her, watching her hands tremble slightly as she lifted the spoon. "Lily," he said after a while, "how long have you been on your own?" She shrugged. "A few months, maybe more. Time feels weird when you don't have anywhere to be. Where do you sleep? Mostly at the old subway tunnels near Central Park. Sometimes in the church basement when the weather's bad. He couldn't look at her for a moment. The idea of a child sleeping in the dark under the city while he sat in this tower of glass and silence made something inside him twist. "Why didn't anyone help you?" he asked quietly. "People look away," she said. "It's easier to pretend they don't see you." He felt the words cut through him like a mirror, reflecting his own guilt. How many people had he ignored because it wasn't convenient? How many chances had he missed to make a difference before it was too late? After dinner, Lily wandered cautiously through the apartment. She stopped in front of Noah's room. The door was half-open light spilling across the carpet. "You can go in," Ethan said softly. "I haven't changed anything." She pushed the door wider and stepped inside. The room was frozen in time books stacked on the desk soccer cleats by the bed. A telescope pointed toward the city. Posters of constellations covered the walls. He liked the stars, she said, running a finger along the telescope. He used to say they made him feel small in the best way, Ethan said from the doorway. Lily smiled faintly. "He told me once he wanted to be an astronaut, or a teacher, or both." Ethan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "He wanted to teach kids who couldn't afford school," he said quietly. "Said everyone deserves to dream big." She turned toward the bookshelf, her eyes catching on a framed photo of Noah with another boy, both laughing with their arms slung around each other. "Who's that?" she asked. "That's Alex," Ethan replied. They were best friends. Lily's expression changed. "I know him," she whispered. Ethan frowned. "You do?" She nodded slowly. "He was with Noah, the day it happened." His pulse quickened. "You're sure?" She hesitated. "They were at the park. I was sitting near the swings. They were arguing. Alex kept saying something about secrets and promises. Noah said he couldn't stay quiet anymore. Then he gave me that note." She looked down, her hands tightening around the hem of her sleeve. "I didn't understand then." But he looked scared. Ethan stepped forward, his voice barely steady. "Scared of what I don't know," she said. "I thought it was just a fight. I didn't know it would be the last time." For a moment, the only sound was the wind rattling faintly against the window. Ethan turned toward the photograph again, studying the two smiling boys. Something in his chest felt heavy, like the first drop before a storm. "Do you think he was hiding something?" he asked, more to himself than to her. She didn't answer, just looked up at him with wide, tired eyes. "He trusted you," she said. "He told me you were brave, even when you didn't believe it." Ethan's breath caught. It had been years since anyone had used that word for him. Brave. He cleared his throat and motioned toward the guest room. "You should get some rest, Lily. We'll talk more in the morning." The room was warm, its soft light spilling across crisp sheets and a small bedside lamp. She climbed into bed slowly, still wearing his coat, and stared at the ceiling. "Do you think he knows we're talking about him?" she asked sleepily. Ethan stood in the doorway, his voice low. "I think he'd like that we are." She smiled, faintly, eyes closing. Within minutes, her breathing softened into steady rhythm. Ethan stayed a while watching her sleep. There was a quiet peace in her face, one he hadn't seen in anyone, least of all himself, in years. When he finally stepped into his study, the apartment felt less empty. He sat at his desk and unfolded the note again, tracing the handwriting that once belonged to his son. "Promise me you'll look after Lily." Outside, the city glittered with indifferent light. For 5 years, Ethan had built walls to keep the world out, but tonight a barefoot girl had walked straight through them. He glanced at the photo of Noah and Alex one more time. There was something in that smile, something that now looked almost burdened. He picked up his phone, hesitated, then set it down. Tomorrow, he would start asking questions. For now, he let the silence settle. The house no longer felt haunted, it felt alive. In the quiet glow of midnight, Ethan whispered to the empty room, "You were right, kid. I understand now." Then, for the first time in years, he allowed himself to breathe. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows, turning the penthouse into a wash of gold. Lily sat at the table eating pancakes Ethan had somehow managed not to burn this time. She looked different in daylight, less like a ghost, more like a child. Yet, beneath the small smile, there was still that guarded sadness that made her seem older than she should be. Ethan watched her quietly, his mind still circling the same thought that had kept him awake all night. Alex Harper. The name that once meant nothing now sat heavy on his chest. There were questions clawing at him, questions no grieving father had ever wanted to ask. After breakfast, he retreated to his office, opened his laptop, and typed in the name Harper Developments. The results flooded in one of New York's largest private construction companies owned by Gregory Harper. Their projects stretched across the country schools, hospitals, corporate towers. But one headline caught his eye: Harper Developments under fire for safety violations. It was dated 6 years ago. Ethan clicked. The article described a collapsed school building upstate, faulty steel beams, dozens injured. The company had settled quietly. His stomach twisted as he scrolled further and found a photo Gregory Harper smiling beside his teenage son Alex. He stared at the screen, then at the photo on his desk of Noah and Alex, their arms slung around each other, faces lit with laughter. How could the same boy in that picture have been the last person to see Noah alive? Ethan reached for his phone and called Detective Sam Ortega, a retired cop, an old friend from his earlier days in business. "Sam," he said, his voice low, "I need you to look into something for me. My son's death, it wasn't just an accident. I think there's more." Sam hesitated. "You sure you want to go down that road, Ethan? Sometimes the truth hurts worse than the lie." "I've been living with lies for 5 years, Ethan said. "I can handle the truth." That afternoon, while Sam began digging, Ethan spent the day with Lily. He'd promised himself he wouldn't let his questions overshadow her presence. She'd already lost enough. Together they made hot cocoa and sat on the balcony, the city stretching endlessly below them. "Do you miss him a lot?" she asked suddenly. "Every day," he said. "Sometimes I still catch myself thinking I'll see him walk through the door." Lily looked down at her mug. "He used to talk about you, you know. Said you were busy, but not in a bad way. Said you were trying to make things better for people." Ethan smiled faintly. "He gave me more credit than I deserved." She tilted her head. "He said you were brave." He felt that word again, brave, echo like it had the night before. "I'm trying to be," he said quietly. That evening, Sam called back. I pulled the files. The night Noah died, there was a police report argument near Riverside Park. 2 male teens, no names given. One of them matched Noah's description. No follow-up, though. They ruled the death accidental because of the drunk driver. Ethan's heart pounded. "Can you find out who the other boy was?" "Already on it," Sam said. "But there's more. Noah volunteered at a school site the week before he died, one of Harper's projects. The same site that failed inspection later. Your kid was asking questions, Ethan. He might have found something he wasn't supposed to." Ethan's hand tightened around the phone. He looked toward the living room where Lily sat drawing at the coffee table, humming softly to herself. "He was trying to protect her," he whispered. "What was that?" Sam asked. "Nothing," Ethan said quickly. "Keep digging, please." After hanging up, he walked over to Lily. She was sketching something a park bench beneath tall trees. 2 figures sat side by side, one small and one tall. "That's me and Noah," she said, smiling. He used to tell me stories about space. Said one day we'd both see the stars from somewhere better. Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. He was right, he said softly. Her smile faded a little. He said he was scared before he left that day. I told him he didn't have to go, but he said he couldn't let something bad happen. He said people could get hurt if he didn't tell. What kind of bad thing? Ethan asked gently. She shook her head. I don't know. He said a lot of people depended on him doing the right thing. Then he gave me the note for you and told me to keep it safe. He felt the walls of the room closing in. Every instinct in him, the businessman, the father, the man who had built empires out of control, screamed that something darker was hiding beneath that so-called accident. Later that night, after Lily fell asleep, Ethan opened his email. A message from Sam waited in his inbox with the subject line, "You were right." He clicked. The report confirmed it. Alex Harper had been seen arguing with Noah that evening minutes before the crash. Witnesses had come forward after the case reopened describing the confrontation. The words, "It's your dad's fault," had been shouted, followed by silence, then the sound of screeching tires. Ethan sat back, the air leaving his lungs. He didn't know whether to feel fury or heartbreak. His son had died trying to tell the truth, and no one had listened. Until now. He went to Noah's room and stood in the doorway. The smell of his cologne still lingered faintly in the air, mixed with dust and time. "You were right, kid," he whispered. "You were trying to fix what we broke." He glanced toward the guest room where Lily slept soundly, her hand still clutching the note Noah had written. A fragile piece of paper had become the bridge between past and present, loss and purpose. Ethan looked out at the city lights shimmering against the night sky. Somewhere out there, Alex Harper was living with a truth he hadn't spoken. And tomorrow Ethan Caldwell intended to find him. The truth arrived not with fanfare but with a quiet knock on Ethan's office door. Detective Sam Ortega stepped inside, his expression grave, a thin file clutched in his hand. "You were right," he said simply. Ethan stood slowly, the world narrowing to that single sentence. Sam placed the file on the desk. "We have a witness." A jogger saw the argument that night. It wasn't just shouting. Alex Harper pushed Noah hard. "Your son stumbled into the street." The car hit him before either of them could move. The words landed like a blade. For a moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. "So it wasn't an accident," he said flatly. Sam hesitated. "Not in the way you think." The driver was still drunk. But that push, it changed everything. Alex panicked, didn't call for help, just ran. His father covered it up, paid people off, made sure the police stopped asking questions. Ethan pressed a trembling hand against his mouth. 5 years of believing fate had taken his son when it had really been silence and fear. "Where is he now?" Ethan asked, his voice low. "Still in the city," Sam said. "He works for his father's company." "Do you want me to—" "No," Ethan interrupted. "I'll handle it." That evening, Ethan drove alone to the Harper estate in Westchester. The mansion stood behind iron gates, all glass and money, the kind of place that looked invincible. But as he approached the door, he didn't see power. He saw rot disguised as luxury. A housekeeper opened the door, startled to see him. Within moments, Alex Harper appeared at the top of the stairs. He looked older than his years, the weight of guilt etched deep into his face. When he saw Ethan, his eyes widened with something between fear and relief. "Mr. Caldwell," he whispered. Ethan's voice was calm, too calm. "We need to talk." They sat in the massive living room, silence stretching between them like glass ready to shatter. Finally, Ethan spoke. "You were with him that night." Alex swallowed hard. "Yes, you argued. Yes, you pushed him." Tears gathered in Alex's eyes. I didn't mean to. He was angry. He said he was going to tell the authorities about my father's company. I tried to stop him, to calm him down. I grabbed his arm, he pulled away, and I pushed. He fell. I swear, I didn't know the car was coming. Ethan's hands tightened into fists, and instead of calling for help, you ran. Alex nodded, shaking. I wanted to, but my dad, he told me to stay quiet. He said he'd fix everything. Ethan's voice broke. He fixed it by burying the truth. By burying my son. Alex's face crumpled. I've lived with it every day since. I see him when I close my eyes. I wanted to tell you, but I was scared. My father said if I spoke, I'd destroy the company, ruin our family. But Noah, he made me promise something before he fell. Ethan froze. What promise? Alex looked up, tears streaking down his cheeks. He said, "Take care of Lily. Don't let her disappear." That's all he could say before. His voice broke completely. For a long time, Ethan said nothing. His anger was still there, hot and blinding, but it was tangled now with something else, grief, sorrow, the faintest trace of understanding. He looked at Alex, a broken man still trying to atone for a moment he couldn't undo. "Did your father know about Lily?" Ethan asked. Alex nodded. Yes. He said she'd be a liability, that if anyone found out Noah was helping a homeless girl, it could make people ask questions. That's why Noah was so determined to speak out. He wanted to expose everything. Ethan stood and walked toward the window. The reflection of his own face stared back, tired-lined, older than he remembered. "You've carried this for 5 years," he said quietly. "That's long enough." Alex looked up, startled. "What are you going to do?" Ethan turned to him. "Tell the truth. All of it, not for revenge, for justice. Noah died trying to do the right thing. It's time someone finished what he started." The next morning, Ethan met with Sam and the district attorney. Within hours, the story broke across every major network, whistleblowers, death reopened billionaires, sun-linked to corporate cover-up. The Harper's empire began to crumble. Gregory Harper was indicted for fraud and obstruction. Alex came forward voluntarily, giving a full confession and publicly apologizing to the Caldwell family. Reporters swarmed the courthouse, but Ethan didn't speak. He wasn't interested in headlines. That evening, he took Lily back to Greenwood Cemetery. Snow dusted the ground again, just as it had the day they met. Together, they stood before Noah's grave. Ethan knelt, placing a single white lily on the marble. "It's over," he whispered. "The truth's out. You can rest now." Lily crouched beside him and gently laid down a folded piece of paper, one of her drawings. "Hi, Noah," she said softly. "I kept my promise. You were right. Your dad's brave after all." Ethan looked at her, his eyes stinging. She smiled through her tears. "He'd be proud of you." He pulled her close, his voice breaking. "No, sweetheart. He'd be proud of you." For the first time in 5 years, Ethan felt peace, not because justice had been served, but because something greater had been restored. The following week, he announced the creation of the Noah Caldwell Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to helping homeless children and protecting whistleblowers who risked their lives for truth. The press called it redemption. Ethan called it duty. But late at night, when the house grew still and the city lights flickered beyond the windows, he would whisper into the quiet, "You did good, son. You did real good." And somewhere in the hush of memory, he could almost hear Noah's voice again, steady, warm, forgiving. A year later, the world looked different, not just to Ethan Caldwell, but to the little girl who had once hidden behind his son's headstone. The Manhattan skyline still glittered the same way, but Ethan no longer lived in the penthouse that had once felt like a monument to loneliness. He and Lily had moved north to a quiet house near Lake Tahoe. The days were slower here. The air was cleaner, and for the first time since Noah's death, Ethan could breathe without the weight of guilt pressing down on his chest. Every morning he brewed coffee while Lily sat by the window, sketching in her worn notebook. She loved to draw the mountains, the trees, the way sunlight rippled across the lake. Sometimes she'd draw Noah, too, never sad, always smiling. The house that once echoed with silence now rang with the sound of laughter music and small feet running down the hall. It was a home again. The Noah Caldwell Foundation had grown faster than Ethan ever imagined. What started as a personal mission had become a nationwide program, providing shelters, scholarships, and mentorship for homeless youth. Every success story, every child given a second chance felt like another heartbeat for Noah, a promise kept. Ethan had poured his time, energy, and resources into the foundation, but deep down, he knew none of it would have existed without Lily. She was the spark that had reignited his life. On the morning of Noah's birthday, the two of them drove back to New York for the first time in months. The city buzzed as always, but Ethan felt strangely calm as they approached Greenwood Cemetery. Lily clutched a bouquet of white lilies against her chest, her expression thoughtful. When they reached the grave, Ethan paused. "It's been 6 years," he murmured. "Feels like yesterday." Lily knelt beside the headstone, brushing away a few fallen leaves. "He'd be proud of you," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "I think he'd be proud of both of us." She placed the flowers down carefully, then added a small folded paper, another one of her drawings. This time, it showed 3 figures standing together beneath a sky full of stars, Noah, Ethan, and herself. Above them, she'd written 3 words in her careful looping handwriting, "The promise lives on." Ethan's eyes burned. He would have loved that. They stood there in silence for a long moment, the wind stirring gently through the trees. Then Lily turned to him. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I used to think I didn't belong anywhere," she said, "that I was just a piece of someone else's story. But now, I think Noah was trying to help me find mine." Ethan swallowed hard. "He did," he said, "and he helped me find mine, too." Later that afternoon, they visited the Foundation's newest youth center in Brooklyn, a bright, renovated space filled with color and noise, and the smell of fresh paint. A mural of Noah's face covered the far wall, surrounded by constellations, and the words, "Be the reason someone keeps believing." As Ethan walked through the building, he felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just charity, it was legacy. Every child reading in the corner, every teen sketching their dreams on the art wall carried a piece of what his son had started. Lily was speaking with one of the volunteers, a young social worker named Grace. "She wants to study art therapy," Grace told Ethan later. "Says she wants to help kids who feel invisible." Ethan nodded, smiling. "That sounds like her." When evening fell, they stood outside on the center's rooftop terrace, the city lights flickering below. Lily leaned on the railing, her hair dancing in the breeze. "Do you think Noah can see all this?" she asked. Ethan looked up at the sky. "If kindness leaves a mark, then yeah," he said quietly. "He sees everything." A few months later, the foundation hosted its first annual gala. Donors, educators, and families filled the hall, but the real stars were the kids. One by one, they shared their stories of second chances, of hope restored. When Lily took the stage, she held the microphone with steady hands, her voice clear but trembling with emotion. "I wouldn't be here today if not for 2 people," she began. "A boy who saw me when no one else did, and his father who kept his promise. They showed me that sometimes love doesn't end. It just changes shape." Ethan felt tears sting his eyes as the room erupted in applause. In that moment, he realized this was what healing looked like, not forgetting, but carrying forward. Later that night, as they drove home through quiet streets, Lily rested her head against the window. "You know," she said sleepily when Noah told me to find you, "I think he already knew what would happen." Ethan smiled. "You think he planned all this?" She nodded. "He wanted you to have someone to keep you company." He glanced at her, her small figure bundled in his old coat. "Then he got his wish," he said softly. When they reached home, the lake shimmered under a blanket of moonlight. Ethan stood on the porch for a long time, watching the reflection ripple across the water. He thought of Noah, his laughter, his compassion, his unshakable belief that good always found a way through. Inside, Lily had already fallen asleep on the couch, her sketchbook open beside her. On the page was a new drawing, a lighthouse standing tall above a stormy sea, its beam cutting through the darkness. At the bottom, she'd written, "For Noah, who taught us to keep the light on." Ethan picked up the sketchbook, smiling through his tears. The ache of loss was still there, but it no longer hollowed him out. It filled him like the echo of a song that never really ends. He looked up at the night sky, the stars shimmering faintly over the water. "You did it, son," he whispered. "You kept your promise." And somewhere in the quiet hum of wind and waves, it almost felt like an answer, soft, certain, and full of peace. Ethan Caldwell's journey began in grief and ended in grace. For years he lived behind walls of silence and success, believing that money could insulate him from pain. But grief doesn't respect fortune, and loss doesn't fade just because the world keeps spinning. When he found Lily, a frightened barefoot girl, hiding behind his son's grave, his life began to shift in ways he never expected. That single encounter, born out of heartbreak, became the doorway to healing. Through Lily, Ethan rediscovered the heart his wealth had buried. She was a mirror of all the goodness his son Noah once embodied: kindness, courage, and compassion. As he cared for her, he saw the world through Noah's eyes, realizing how much his son had given to others, even when he had nothing left to give. And when the truth about Noah's death finally came to light, the betrayal, the cover-up, the guilt, it didn't destroy Ethan. It transformed him. Instead of choosing vengeance, he chose forgiveness. Instead of bitterness, he chose meaning. By exposing the corruption behind Noah's death, Ethan did more than seek justice. He gave his son's story a purpose beyond tragedy. Founding the Noah Caldwell Foundation became his way of keeping his son's promise alive, a promise to protect, to care, and to give hope to those who have none. And in doing so, he discovered something profound. Love doesn't end when life does. It continues through the lives we touch, the hearts we heal, and the kindness we choose even after we've been broken. Lily, once invisible to the world, became living proof of that truth. The scared child he met in the snow grew into a confident young woman, her laughter echoing through the home that had once been filled with silence. She carried Noah's light forward, turning her pain into art, her loss into love. Together they honored his memory not by mourning, but by living fully, compassionately, bravely. Ethan's story reminds us that redemption doesn't come from success, revenge, or control. It comes from letting go, from opening our hearts to others, and from allowing love to do the quiet work of repair. The greatest legacies are not built from power or money, they are built from compassion. One act of kindness, one second chance. One person who refuses to give up on another, that's what changes lives. And maybe that's the lesson we're meant to take from this story. The smallest gesture can save someone's world. You don't have to be a millionaire to make a difference. You just have to care. Whether it's helping a stranger, forgiving someone who hurt you, or reaching out to someone you've lost touch with, those are the choices that define us. That's how love endures. So, as you close this story, think about your own. Who could you forgive? Who could you help? Whose life could you quietly change by showing up, by listening, by believing they matter? because that's what Noah did for Lily. That's what Lily did for Ethan. And that's what we're all capable of if we choose to see the humanity in one another. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, take a moment to share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment. Tell us what part touched you most and let us know what kindness means to you. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. It's your support that keeps stories like this alive. Every view, every word of encouragement helps us create more stories that remind the world love never dies. It only finds new places to grow.